So, Ian and I were talking the other day, as we tend to do, about nerd stuff. Nothing unusual there. We talked about Halo, then Star Wars, then Marvel, and eventually we started talking about this weird thing that happens in certain corners of fandom where people seem to absolutely hate the very thing they're supposedly fans of. And I'm not talking about fair criticism here. God knows I have criticized fandoms. I'm talking about the people where every single trailer sucks, every announcement is terrible, every change is an insult, and somehow every new thing is further proof that the franchise has been dead for the last 15 years. Which is impressive, because apparently Halo has died more times than Kenny from South Park. And somewhere in the middle of this conversation, Ian said something that has been rattling around in my head ever since. And I'm paraphrasing here, but basically, maybe some of these people aren't actually nostalgic for old Halo. Maybe they're just nostalgic for who they were when they played old Halo. God damn it, Ian. Because that's different. And unfortunately, I knew exactly what he meant. I'm a nostalgia guy, like obnoxiously so. I'm a 90s kid. Give me Blockbuster on a Friday night, Saturday morning cartoons, couch multiplayer, Pizza Hut when the roof still looked like a fucking Pizza Hut. I have an entire series on this show dedicated to rummaging around in the attic of my childhood. I love that shit. My childhood in the 90s was magical. But now Ian had put this question in my head. When I say, man, Halo was so much better back then, am I actually talking about Halo? Or am I talking about back then? Oh, fuck. Hey, and welcome to, or welcome back to, the Average Joe Nerdcast. I'm Nate, your resident Average Joe, and apparently incapable of having a normal conversation with my best friend without eventually turning it into a podcast episode. If you're new around here, then welcome. This is where we take the stuff we love, whether that's movies, games, pop culture, weird history, whatever happens to send me down the rabbit hole that week, and ask probably way more questions about it than any reasonable person should. And before we start pulling on this particular loose thread, just some quick housekeeping. If you dig what we're doing here, be sure to like the episode, subscribe, ring the bell over on YouTube. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts from, and if you've got just 30 seconds, be sure to leave us a 5-star rating and review. It genuinely helps more average Joes find this weird little corner of the internet we've built together. All right, now back to Ian ruining nostalgia for everyone, because the more I thought about what he said, the more I started seeing it everywhere. From Halo to Star Wars to the MCU to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to Power Rangers. Hell, Doctor Who is built around the idea that the main character periodically becomes a completely different person, and even they can't change without someone getting their knickers in a bunch. So clearly, this isn't just about whether Halo Studios made the grass on Installation 04 too damn green. There's something else happening here. And I want to know what it is, because I love nostalgia. This show celebrates nostalgia. I'm not interested in spending the next little bit telling everyone, well, actually, your childhood sucked and Blockbuster was completely inconvenient. Screw that. I truly miss Blockbuster. But I also don't want to become the 38-year-old standing in the doorway telling some kid that the version of the thing they love doesn't count because mine came first. So, where's the line? When does "I fucking love what this used to be" become "I refuse to let it become anything else"? And maybe more importantly, if Ian is right, how much of what we're defending has anything to do with the franchise at all? I don't know yet, but I know where I want to start, because before we put modern fandom on trial for being a bunch of miserable bastards, we probably need to question our first witness, our own memories. So, let's head down this rabbit hole. So let's start with Halo, because if I'm going to spend an episode poking at toxic fandoms, I should probably begin by kicking over the trash can in my own home. I love Halo, and if you've been around the Nerdcast for any considerable amount of time, then you know this. Halo is woven into the DNA of this show, and if someone sat me down and said, "Nate, favorite era, go," I'm going backward. Combat Evolved, Halo 2, Halo 3, ODST, Halo Reach. That original run, it was truly fucking special. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend that's only nostalgia talking. Those are arguably great games, but after Ian said what he said, I started thinking about how I actually remember them. Because when I remember those games, I'm not just remembering the games, I'm remembering the rooms I was in while I experienced those games. I'm remembering that original Xbox Duke controller that looked like someone designed a gamepad for a gorilla. I'm remembering Xbox Live being this completely alien concept. You're telling me this box underneath my TV can connect me to some dude 3 states away? And within approximately 14 seconds, he's going to call me something that would get this podcast removed from Spotify? Technology! The future is here. I'm remembering those late nights, my friends, that feeling of just one more match, which was teenage terminology for, we will be doing this until someone's mother intervenes. That's intrinsically part of Halo for me. And that's when I realized something. There's no little folder in my brain labeled Halo 2 Objective Critical Assessment, where I've carefully preserved my original thoughts on weapon balancing, map design, enemy AI, and narrative structure. No, those games are tangled up with being a teenager. Those games are attached to people, places, sounds, entire periods of my life. So I started wondering, is that just me? And apparently, no. Because while I was digging around, I ran into something psychologists call the reminiscence bump, which sounds like either a psychological phenomenon or a dance performed exclusively at high school reunions. But basically, when adults look back across their lives, we tend to recall a disproportionate number of autobiographical memories from adolescence and early adulthood. And researchers have kicked around several explanations as to why. Those years are packed with firsts, independence, relationships, jobs, major changes. You're figuring out who the hell you are while all this stuff is happening. So those memories become deeply connected to your identity. And that right there got my attention. Because just think about the stuff we call nostalgic. For me, Halo, Toonami, Fox Kids, Snick, 31 Nights of Halloween, Blockbuster. For someone else, it might be Doctor Who, or Star Wars, or the MCU, whatever. The point isn't necessarily the thing. The thing happened to collide with you while you were becoming you. And suddenly Ian's comment wasn't sounding like just an interesting thought anymore. Maybe there's actually something underneath it. Because when someone says Halo hasn't been good since Halo 3, maybe they're making a perfectly legitimate argument about Halo. Or maybe Halo 3 has one advantage no modern game could ever possibly overcome. It happened to them at exactly the right time. And memory? Well, it gets even weirder. Because our brains don't store our lives like recordings. There's no pristine little Blu-ray sitting inside your skull containing Christmas Morning 1997, the director's cut. Memory is reconstructive. We rebuild experiences from pieces. And every time we do that, some details are stronger than others. Some may disappear. Emotion gets tangled into everything. Later experiences can change how we understand earlier ones. And then I found another term, rosy retrospection, which basically means under certain circumstances, we can remember past experiences more favorably later than we evaluated them while they were actually happening. And hoo boy, now we're getting somewhere. Because listen to how we talk about old gaming. Games were complete back then. Yeah, sometimes. You know what else happened back then? You bought a game, and if that motherfucker was broken, congratulations on your broken game. That's it. There was no day one patches, no hot fixes, no, hey guys, we're aware of an issue where completing level 4 deletes your entire save file and causes the PlayStation to insult your mother. Our team is on it and investigating. Nothing. That shit was broken forever. Then there's, well, games didn't nickel and dime you back then. Again, sometimes. But let's not pretend video games discovered ways to separate children from money in 2015. Arcades were specifically engineered around beating the shit out of you until you surrendered another quarter. Insert coin to continue. You died. Insert coin to continue. You died again. Insert coin to continue. Motherfucker, I'm 8 years old. I don't have an income. Different business model, same tiny capitalist goblin. And couch multiplayer? I will defend couch multiplayer until I die. I miss it. But whenever we talk about it now, it's always, man, everybody used to just sit together. True. Beautiful. Do you remember what else happened? Screen watching. Do not sit there acting innocent. Every friend group had one. Dude, how the fuck did you know I was there? I heard you. Bullshit, Corey. You looked at my corner of the screen. We should have taken you outside. So, I'm not saying those memories are fake, because that's way too easy. The couch was fun. Those nights were truly special. Halo really did blow my mind. What I'm saying is 20 years later, the bullshit doesn't always get equal billing. And honestly, maybe that's okay. I don't particularly need my brain preserving every boring Tuesday from 2002 in perfect detail. But here's where I think it gets dangerous. When the highlight reel becomes evidence, because now something released today isn't competing with an old game. It's competing with an old game plus everything surrounding it. Halo 3 isn't just Halo 3 anymore. It's Halo 3 plus being 18 years old again, plus whoever you played it with, plus the midnight release, plus staying up way too late, plus fewer responsibilities, plus the feeling of discovering something before you'd already experienced 15 other versions of it. And now, I'm 38. I've got a wife, kids, bills, a podcast, more dogs than I can count, and about 14 things I'm supposed to remember before Thursday. And apparently, if I sleep slightly wrong, I can truly injure myself. Then I boot up a modern Halo, and somewhere deep in my brain, I'm apparently going, all right, motherfucker, make me feel like I did back in 2001. How? What setting is that? Options, video, audio, gameplay, accessibility, restore youth, on. Oh shit, there it is. Microsoft, you lazy bastards, why wasn't that enabled by default? And this is where I want to be careful, because I don't want to swing so far in the other direction that we start pretending quality does not exist. Sometimes the old thing truly was better. Sometimes an older game had much better design. Sometimes the movie had better writing. Sometimes a franchise genuinely loses sight of what made it work. We're going to get there. But Ian's question introduced another variable into the comparison that I hadn't really thought about before. Me. Halo changed, absolutely, but so did I. So did you. And that's when I started thinking about all the other stuff from childhood that we swear was better. Blockbuster, Saturday mornings, Pizza Hut, Power Rangers, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I realized we might be asking the wrong question here. Instead of, was it really better? Maybe I want to know, what exactly are we remembering? Because sometimes the thing itself isn't even the most important part of the memory. Sometimes it's just the bookmark. And that idea, the media is the bookmark, that really started messing with me. Because Halo isn't the only thing that works like that. Think about the stuff you get nostalgic for, not the important stuff you're supposed to remember. I'm talking about the weird stuff. A commercial, a game main menu, the sound a console makes when it boots up, the smell of an old video store, a restaurant that doesn't even exist anymore, a cartoon intro you haven't heard in 20 plus years that somehow still occupies a completely rent-free penthouse in your brain. Nowadays, you can't remember why you walked into the kitchen, but somebody plays the first 3 seconds of the Power Rangers theme song, and suddenly, go, go, Power Rangers! Perfect recall, no hesitation. Apparently, that's where the storage capacity went. And for me, these things aren't just entertainment anymore, they're little coordinates. Combat Evolved, I was 12 years old. Halo 3, 2007. I'm 18. I'm in the military, completely different chapter of my life, different people, different room, different version of me, but hit that menu music, and there's suddenly a bridge between the two. And that's wild, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how much of the nostalgia we celebrate on this show works exactly like that. For instance, take Power Rangers. I don't just remember Mighty Morphin because I thought Jason was cool or because Tommy showed up with a flute dagger and somehow every kid on Earth all collectively decided, yep, that's the coolest motherfucker alive now. I remember being a kid. I remember the colors, the toys, the theme song, running around pretending to morph. Probably absolutely beating the hell out of some piece of furniture with a plastic weapon. Sorry, Mom. And that's my Power Rangers. Mighty Morphin has a specific emotional gravity for me because that's where I entered. But Power Rangers didn't stop when I stopped being the target audience. There were kids whose Rangers were in space. Time Force, Dino Thunder, SPD, and somewhere there's probably someone listening right now going, okay, old man, actually, Ninja Storm. Fine, that's the entire point. Your bookmark is somewhere else. And that's where nostalgia gets fascinating. Because the version we encountered at the right moment can start feeling like the default version. And not because someone declared it canonically superior, because that's where our memory starts. Same with the Ninja Turtles. My Turtles? Give me that 1990 movie. Give me those suits. Give me Raphael screaming, damn! And an entire generation of kids all collectively realizing, oh no, the turtle said a bad word. That movie lives somewhere deep inside me, but someone else's Turtles are the 2003 series, and someone else's are 2012. Some kid right now might look at Mutant Mayhem and go, hey, those are the Ninja Turtles. And my first instinct is not, well, actually, kid, allow me to explain why the Jim Henson Creature Shop represents the definitive no. Jesus Christ. Let them eat their pizza. Because once I started looking at nostalgia this way, something clicked. Maybe the reason these arguments get so personal is that we're rarely arguing about just the media. If you tell me that old game isn't as good as you remember, fine. That's an opinion. But somewhere underneath that, you're brushing up against a memory, a period of my life. People I associate with it, maybe someone who isn't around anymore, maybe a version of myself that I miss. And suddenly, a conversation about Power Rangers can carry way more emotional weight than Power Rangers should reasonably be expected to carry. And that's not ridiculous. That's human. But it does create a trap. Because if the media becomes a bookmark for a meaningful part of your life, then changing the media can almost feel like someone scribbling in the book. And that's where I think this is my favorite version can quietly become this is the only correct version. Just look at Doctor Who. And this is maybe the funniest possible fandom to struggle with change because change is the entire fucking premise. The Doctor regenerates. Brand new face, brand new personality, new companions, new creative team, new tone. The show basically walks into the room every few years wearing a new coat and says, "All right, we're doing some different shit now." And people still go, "What have they done to Doctor Who?" Sir, were you watching? He regenerated. We have paperwork on this. And yet, I get it, because everyone has their doctor. Maybe it's Tom Baker, maybe it's David Tennant, Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, Jodie Whittaker, Ncuti Gatwa. Whoever met you at the right moment. That doctor isn't just an actor anymore, they're attached to when you watched, who you watched with, what your life looked like. And when that era ends, there is a tiny bit of grief in it, even when you know that regeneration is coming. Even when the regeneration is the entire gimmick. And that's powerful. But now, zoom back out. Halo, Power Rangers, Ninja Turtles, Doctor Who, all completely different franchises with completely different audiences and completely different histories. And the same little pattern keeps showing up. The version that found me becomes the version I compare everything else against. Which brings us to probably the biggest, loudest, most lightsaber-shaped example imaginable. Because if you want to watch this happen across multiple generations in almost perfect sequence, then we need to talk about Star Wars. Now, everyone behave. I know that's probably asking too much, because if there's one fandom where the phrase, "that's not my," has practically become a family heirloom, it's Star Wars. And what's fascinating to me isn't even which trilogy is better. I am not doing that. I'm not walking into that minefield wearing clown shoes. What interests me is watching the same argument get inherited. Because there was a time when the prequels were the thing that supposedly ruined Star Wars. And I don't mean, I didn't particularly care for those. No, people fucking hated those movies. Jar Jar Binks, young Anakin, the dialogue, the politics, the CGI, midichlorians. That word alone could start a bar fight at a comic convention. Midichlorians. You take that back! And some of that criticism, hey, it's completely fair. Again, we're not doing revisionist history in an episode partially about revisionist memory. The prequels have their flaws, but the reaction went way beyond criticism. For some fans, George Lucas had somehow destroyed the very thing George Lucas created. Which is an impressive level of ownership when you really think about it. Excuse me, George, as the creator of Star Wars, we're going to need you to stop making Star Wars incorrectly. And then something happened that no one could stop. Time. Those annoying little kids who loved the prequels, well, they grew up. The kids who thought Darth Maul was the coolest thing they'd ever seen, the kids who watched the Clone Wars, the kids running around the backyard pretending to be Anakin and Obi-Wan, they all became adults, and suddenly the entire internet started sounding different. Because for that generation, the prequels are nostalgic. That's their bookmark. That's the Star Wars that met them at exactly the right time. And I find that completely fascinating because the movies didn't magically change. The Phantom Menace didn't sneak into Skywalker Ranch at night and rewrite itself. Jar Jar didn't receive a software update. So what changed? The audience. The kids who loved those movies grew up and gained a voice in the conversation. And now you've got people who will defend the prequel era with the same emotional attachment older fans had to the original trilogy. Then Disney era Star Wars arrives, and here we fucking go again. Brand new characters, new movies, new shows, new arguments. Star Wars is dead. Star Wars is ruined. That's not Star Wars. They don't understand Star Wars. My childhood has been destroyed. And I'm not saying all criticism of modern Star Wars is toxic nostalgia. Absolutely not. There are creative decisions across that entire franchise. I will happily sit down with you and go, yeah, dude, what the fuck happened there? That's just part of being a fan, but the generational pattern is hard to ignore. Because somewhere during all that arguing, I think we forget something very basic about Star Wars. Kids love Star Wars, and they always have. Obviously, Star Wars isn't only for children. There's mythology, politics, religion, war, loss, family, fascism, redemption. There are all kinds of ideas adults can dig into. We've been doing it for almost 50 years, but also, come on, space wizards, funny robots, a giant furry man whose primary method of communication is "Roar!" and everyone understands him. Han's just like, Chewie says the hyperdrive is fucked. How? What part of "Roar" contained the diagnostic information, Han? Does pitch indicate the subsystem? Is there syntax? Shit, I've gotten distracted. The point is, Star Wars is built to capture imagination, especially a kid's imagination. And that kid doesn't care that the thing they're falling in love with isn't the version that you fell in love with. Some kids' very first Star Wars is not A New Hope. Maybe it's the Clone Wars, or Rebels, or one of the sequel movies, or it's as simple as a Lego game. Maybe their doorway is a character that you don't give a single shit about. But to them, that's Star Wars. And here's where this gets really uncomfortable for longtime fans. We weren't the final audience. There's something I think nostalgia has a really hard time accepting, because when something reaches us during those formative years and becomes part of our identity, there's this temptation to think the franchise grew up with us, and therefore it should keep growing in whatever direction we want. But Star Wars didn't belong to the 10-year-olds in 1977 and then stop. Those kids grew up, and more kids arrived. Then they grew up, and more kids arrived. The door stays open. And maybe that's part of why the franchise survived long enough for us to argue about it in the first place. You see the same thing with Power Rangers. If you're around my age, then Mighty Morphin probably has gravitational pull. That original team, Jason, Zach, Billy, Trini, Kimberly, Tommy, that's the lineup buried in all 90s kids' brains. But imagine telling someone whose childhood was Time Force. Those aren't the real Power Rangers. According to who? The Morphin Grid Homeowners Association? Sorry, son, your Ranger application has been denied. Your childhood occurred outside the approved nostalgia window. Come on. Or Ninja Turtles, and we've already talked about it. Every generation gets 4 mutated teenagers, a rat dad, and increasingly questionable interpretations of pizza. That's the whole deal. And Doctor Who practically built generational handoffs into its biology. These franchises survive because they're allowed to meet people somewhere brand new. But there's another reason I wanted to bring Star Wars into this. Because the prequel cycle reveals something important. Today's they ruined it can become tomorrow's. You just don't understand how important this was to us. And that's worth remembering before we appoint ourselves guardians of what something is allowed to become. And Speaking of fandoms currently arguing about whether the glory days are permanently behind them, we should probably talk about Marvel, because holy shit, has nostalgia worked fast on the MCU. It hasn't even been that long since Endgame, and we're already talking about the Infinity Saga like Kevin Feige descended from Mount Sinai carrying 23 flawless Blu rays. Average Joes, we were there, and I have some notes. Avengers Endgame came out in 2019. That was just 7 years ago. And somehow we've already reached, man, do you remember when Marvel movies were good? And yeah, I do. I also remember when Marvel was fine. That's the part that seems to be disappearing because the Infinity Saga has started getting compressed in our collective memory into this incredible uninterrupted run from the first Iron Man all the way to Endgame. Just banger after banger after banger, then Thanos pure cinema. Dude, we were all there. There were absolutely incredible movies in that run, from the first Iron Man to the Avengers, to Captain America the Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, Civil War, Spider-Man Homecoming, Black Panther. Just pick your favorites. I'm not here to rank them, but let's not sit here pretending every single movie between Tony Stark building that suit in a cave and Cap saying Avengers Assemble was delivered to us on a stone tablet by God. We had Thor the Dark World. We had Iron Man 2. We had the Incredible Hulk sitting over there in the corner for years like Marvel's weird cousin everyone technically acknowledged was at the family reunion, but no one remembered inviting. Is he still canon? I think so. Should we talk to him? Just don't make eye contact. And even movies people enjoy now weren't always talked about the way they're remembered today. There were complaints, villain problems, formula complaints, movies that felt like setup for other movies. Arguments about whether Marvel was getting too samey. People had been predicting superhero fatigue since approximately the second superhero movie. This was not 23 consecutive victory laps. And that's okay. That's actually what makes the Infinity Saga so impressive. It wasn't perfect. It was this ridiculous interconnected experiment that stumbled occasionally and still managed to build towards something completely enormous. But after Endgame, the memory starts getting cleaned up. The middling stuff gets compressed, the frustrations fade, the highlights remain. And suddenly the comparison becomes modern Marvel versus every time the Infinity Saga made you lose your fucking mind. Well, yeah, modern Marvel is going to have a hard time winning that fight because you're comparing one movie that came out Thursday to 11 years of greatest hits. And that's not a review. That's what I call the MCU, Volume 1. And there's another thing Ian and I were talking about that I think matters here. For a lot of us, the MCU didn't just happen across 11 years of movies. It happened across 11 years of our lives. Just think about where you were in 2008. Now think about where you were in 2019. Now that's a long time. Some people went from high school to adulthood, college to career, single to married, no kids to kids, kids to older kids. Entire friendships and relationships existed inside that time span. So when Tony says, I am Iron Man at the beginning, and then you hear those words again 11 years later, Marvel didn't manufacture all of the emotion in that moment by itself, because you brought 11 years with you. That's exactly why Endgame was such a weird cultural experience. You weren't just watching characters arrive at the end of an arc. A lot of us were realizing, holy shit, I've been doing this with these characters for over a decade. And that's real. And how the hell is the next phase supposed to reproduce that immediately? Because it can't. And it shouldn't. But then something comes out 2 years later and we go, just doesn't feel like Endgame. No shit, dude. Iron Man 2 didn't feel like Endgame either. We just hadn't seen Endgame yet. And that, I think, is another trick nostalgia can pull on us. We compare the middle of something new to the payoff of something old. And that's brutal. Just imagine watching season 1 of a show and going, I don't know, man, the finale isn't as emotionally satisfying as the show I watched for 12 years. Well, could you just give them a minute? Now, and this is important, that does not mean every criticism of the post Endgame MCU is secretly because you're sad about 2019. There have been legitimate problems, from inconsistent quality to an enormous amount of content, projects that felt disconnected, characters and story threads disappearing for long stretches of time. Visual effects workers publicly raising concerns about workloads and working conditions. Marvel itself has acknowledged the need to slow down and focus more on quality. So, again, the answer isn't shut up and consume. Absolutely not. If something doesn't work, then just say it doesn't work. But maybe we should make sure we're actually criticizing the thing sitting in front of us, instead of punishing it because it hasn't recreated the emotional payoff of 11 years of storytelling. And I think that's the distinction this entire conversation keeps pushing me towards. Because there are really two questions. Is this as good as what came before? And that's a fair question. And does this make me feel the way the old thing made me feel? And that's also a fair question. But those aren't the same question. And if we confuse them, we can start treating an emotional response like an objective measurement. Which brings me right back home. Because I don't want anyone listening to this thinking I'm arguing for some kind of participation trophy fandom where every new thing is wonderful and criticism is mean. No. I have spent too many years loving Halo to pull that shit. I've got complaints, receipts even. And if we're going to figure out where criticism turns into toxicity, then it's probably time I put my own fandom under the microscope. Because sometimes the fans aren't imagining it. Sometimes the new shit, well, it really does suck. Sometimes the movie is bad. Sometimes the game is broken. Sometimes a studio makes a decision so completely baffling, you stare at the screen like, who in the fuck was in the room when we agreed to this? And that's not toxic fandom. That's just having standards. And since Halo started this entire conversation, it's time to put Halo on the table. Halo Infinite specifically. And to tell you the truth, I wanted to love that game. And there are things about Infinite I genuinely like. The gunplay feels good. The sandbox, there are moments where that Halo magic absolutely shows up. The grapple shot, I don't know who decided Master Chief needed to become a 1,000-pound Spider-Man, but fuck it. I guess that shit was fun. But Infinite's multiplayer overall just wasn't my cup of tea. And more importantly, some of my criticism has absolutely nothing to do with, well, back in my day, Halo was better. The game launched missing features I had every reason to expect from a Halo game. Forge wasn't there at launch, campaign co-op wasn't there at launch, and planned split-screen campaign co-op was eventually canceled entirely. That's not, the menu doesn't make me feel like 2007. Those are actual decisions. I can point to them. I can explain why they mattered to me. And I can say, I think Halo Infinite was worse because of this. That's criticism. And criticism is not the enemy of fandom. Sometimes criticism is evidence that you genuinely give a shit. I've got high standards for Halo because I love Halo. If I didn't, I'd just shrug. And just go play something else. Honestly, indifference might be worse. At least anger means there was enough of a relationship there to disappoint you. Hey dude, how was it? I don't know. Ooh, that's a fucking funeral. So Argue, please. Tell me the new movie sucked. Tell me why you hated the art direction. Tell me why the mechanics don't work. Tell me why this doctor didn't connect with you. Tell me why that Power Rangers season just wasn't your thing. Tell me why modern Marvel isn't hitting. Tell me why you think Bungie understood something about Halo that later developers didn't. That's fandom. And some of those conversations can be fun as hell. The problem is not criticism. The problem is something I started noticing while watching the reaction to Halo Campaign Evolve. Because almost immediately, here we fucking go. It's too shiny. Okay. The Halo ring looks too new. Okay. It doesn't look ancient enough. It doesn't feel vast enough. And I'm just sitting there going, what exactly are we doing here? We're conducting forensic archaeology on the shininess of a fictional space hula hoop. And before anyone writes in, you are allowed to prefer the original. You might genuinely think the old lighting created more mystery. You might prefer the atmosphere. Maybe there's a design choice that doesn't work for you. Cool, that's interesting. Tell me why. What I'm talking about is the relentless hunt for the next charge. The lighting, the textures, the geometry, the grass, the rocks, the trees, Chief's armor, the fucking horizon. At some point, I'm just over here waiting for someone to post, well, Master Chief's left ass cheek is reflecting approximately 11% more light than it did in 2001, proving once again that these developers fundamentally misunderstand Halo. Sir, please, we're going to need you to step away from the Spartan. Because there's a difference between looking critically at something and looking for something to criticize. And I think that's the line I've been trying to find since Ian and I had this conversation. Criticism says, what's wrong with this? Toxicity says, there has to be something wrong with this. One is willing to be surprised, while the other has already written the verdict and is just collecting evidence. And that second one, that shit gets weird. Because now imagine something you supposedly love announces a new project, and your first response is not excitement, or curiosity, or hell, even healthy skepticism. It's immediately, all right, motherfuckers, disappoint me. And what a miserable way to experience something you apparently love. Some poor social media manager somewhere whispers, God help us all. And the thing doesn't even exist yet. And that's the part that fascinates me. Because criticism should require something to criticize. But we've gotten incredibly good at being angry about the theoretical version of a thing that lives entirely inside our own heads. Casting announcements, ruined. Teaser image, ruined. Logo, ruined. A blurry photograph taken through a fence from 300 yards away. I have several concerns about the direction of the franchise. Dude, that's probably a trash can. And here's where I have to turn the camera around just a little bit, because I've done versions of this too. I mean, we all have. You hear, we're remaking, and before they finish the sentence, why? Reboot? No one asked for this. Brand new actors? Ugh. There's a defensive reflex there, especially when it's something that you genuinely care about. Because you don't want to watch someone fuck it up. I get it. But sometimes the thing comes out, you watch it or you play it, and goddamn, it's good. And now your brain has a decision to make. Do you admit, well, shit, I was wrong? Or do you start moving the goalposts? Okay, but... No but. You liked it. It's okay. No one is coming to your house to confiscate your nerd card. There's no fandom tribunal, trust me. Producer Steve is not outside with a clipboard. Well, at least I don't think he is. Jesus Christ, Steve, no one is going to name 3 Sangheelys. But there's something else happening here too, because being the fan who is hard to impress carries a weird kind of status online. You weren't fooled by the trailer. You spotted the flaw. You know the lore. You saw through the corporate marketing. You're not one of those mindless people who just gets excited because the logo showed up. You're a real fan. And now we've crossed into something completely different. Because what happens when criticizing modern Halo becomes part of how you demonstrate that you're a Halo fan? What happens when hating modern Star Wars becomes proof that you understand old Star Wars? What happens when every Marvel project needs to fail so you can continue being right that Marvel died after Endgame? Now, the new thing being good creates a problem, because if you enjoy it, then you lose. And suddenly, fandom isn't about the thing anymore. It's about winning the argument. And the more I thought about that, the more I realized nostalgia might only be half this story. Because 25 years ago, you could be the grumpy bastard in your friend group who hated the new thing. But now, you can build an audience around it. You can monetize it. You can be rewarded for being angry before anyone else even knows what they're angry about. Which raises a completely different question. Maybe fandom didn't suddenly become more miserable. Maybe misery just became really good for engagement. And like so many episodes before this one, we have now officially arrived at the machine. And I want to be careful here because I don't think social media created angry nerds. I mean, come on. We have always been like this. You put 3 Star Wars fans in a room in 1985, and eventually someone was going to say something about Ewoks and ruin the entire evening. We had forums, message boards, fan sites, Usenet, comic shops, conventions, school cafeterias. People have been arguing about fictional stuff for as long as we've had fictional stuff worth arguing about. But modern social media changed something. It changed the incentive. Because the platform doesn't particularly care whether you enjoyed the trailer. It cares whether you engaged with the trailer. Did you click? Did you comment? Did you share? Did you watch? Did you immediately send it to your buddy with, "Look at this fucking idiot. Congratulations, you're engaged." And there's research behind pieces of this. Researchers have found that emotionally charged material can spread more effectively online, that moral outrage can propagate through social networks, and that social feedback can actually reinforce future expressions of outrage. Which, yeah, that tracks. Because I watched the trailer, I have some concerns, but overall, I'm cautiously optimistic, is a perfectly reasonable human response. It is also a dogshit thumbnail. But Halo is dead. Oh, well, what happened? I better click on that. Star Wars has been destroyed. Again? Jesus Christ. Click on that one. The MCU is finished. Hang on. Didn't we finish it last Tuesday? Click. And there's the trap. Because now negativity isn't just something you feel. It can become something you perform. And I don't even necessarily mean consciously. I'm not saying everyone criticizing something online is sitting in a dark room going, "Excellent. The algorithm hungers." Although I choose to believe someone is. I'm talking about what happens when certain reactions repeatedly get rewarded. You post, "Hey, I thought this looked pretty cool." 12 likes. But you post, "This single frame proves the people making Halo hate Halo." 400 comments, 37 quote posts, 3 response videos. Some dude with an anime avatar tells you to go play in traffic. Hey, engagement! What a healthy little ecosystem we've built. And before we go too far, positivity can become performative too. Absolutely. Some people will defend anything if the correct logo is attached to it. Microsoft could announce Master Chief Tax Preparation Simulator, and someone would immediately reply, "Let them cook." No. Put the spatula down. They have officially cooked enough. Something has gone terribly wrong. So this isn't negative opinion, bad, positive opinion, good. That's baby shit. It's about what happens when your reaction starts being shaped by the reaction that gets rewarded. And outrage has one hell of an advantage. It's immediate. You don't even have to have seen the thing. You just need a screenshot, or a quote, or a headline, or a rumor. A 7-second clip stripped of all context. And suddenly, everyone's got a dissertation. How many times have you seen something announced, thought, huh, that could be cool, then opened up social media, and 10 minutes later, you've consumed so many explanations of why you should be angry, worried, offended, disappointed, or suspicious that you don't even remember your original reaction. That's the part that bothers me. Because before you got a chance to decide how you felt, the internet handed you a menu. Today's specials: outrage, disappointment, corporate betrayal, childhood ruined, side of fries. And once that becomes the dominant language of a fandom, I wonder if negativity starts feeling like expertise. Because I liked it doesn't sound particularly sophisticated. But actually, this fundamentally misunderstands the established visual language and thematic identity of the original franchise. Ooh, shit. This motherfucker went to college. Maybe he does have a point. And sometimes he does. That's the important part. Sometimes that's thoughtful criticism. But other times, dude, you just don't like the helmet. You can say that. You don't need to convene the Hague. And there's something seductive about being the person who isn't impressed. Because excitement is easy to frame as naivete. You actually think that's going to be good? Yeah, maybe. God forbid I experience anticipation. Do you remember anticipation? We did an entire episode about this shit. Apparently, we're not allowed to have it anymore. Now you're supposed to watch a 90-second teaser, freeze frame it like the Zapruder film, identify 17 lore violations, and upload, "The franchise is dead. Yet again. This time, for real. We need to talk." No, we really fucking don't. But then I started wondering why cynicism feels so comfortable. Because it's not just status, it's safe. Think about it. If I say, dude, I am so stoked for this, I'm putting something out there. I'm admitting that I care. Maybe it disappoints me, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe 6 months from now, someone digs up that clip and goes, huh, this aged well. But if I say, looks like shit, I'm protected. Because if it sucks, I called it. But if it's good, easy. Just move the goalpost. Okay, but the original was better. Okay, but the player count. Okay, but the next season. Okay, but Jesus Christ, at some point, do you even want to like the thing anymore? And I don't mean that as some shitty gotcha. I just genuinely wonder. Because underneath the anger, there might still be someone who really cares. Maybe Halo got them through something. Maybe Star Wars was something they shared with their dad. Maybe Power Rangers was the first thing they remembered being obsessed with. Or maybe Doctor Who reminds them of someone they used to watch it with. Or maybe the MCU represents 11 years where their whole life changed. These aren't meaningless corporate logos floating out in space. People attach themselves to stories. We've already established that. So if caring makes you vulnerable, cynicism becomes your armor. If every new thing sucks, it can't disappoint you. If every studio is incompetent, then you never have to trust them. And if the franchise is already dead, then you never have to watch it die. And if everything new is automatically worse than the thing you loved when you were younger, then your childhood remains undefeated. Huh. There it is. We went through algorithms, outrage, internet incentives, and somehow we ended up right back in that conversation me and Ian were having. Not because social media created nostalgia, because it didn't. The machine just figured out how to amplify what was already there. And that's when this entire rabbit hole finally stopped being about angry people on the internet for me. Because it's easy to sit here and roast someone measuring the age of installation 04 based on fucking surface reflectivity. That's fun. I can do that all day. But if I'm going to turn the microscope around, then it has to point at me too. Because recently I looked at the exact same remake those people were tearing apart. Same Halo ring, same new lighting, same changes, same 25 years of baggage. And I had a completely different reaction. I booted up Campaign Evolved, I looked at that ring, and to tell you the truth, I am not embarrassed to say this. I shed a fucking tear. I sure did. I shed a tear. And for about a half a second, there was that stupid little voice in the back of my head going, "Really, dude? You're a 38-year-old man getting emotional over Halo." And then, no, fuck that. I'm not embarrassed by it. Why the hell would I be? Halo has been part of my life for 25 years. Combat Evolved came out in 2001. I was a kid. And I can still remember what that game felt like. Not what I thought about the texture resolution, not whether the lighting was accurate, not what Digital Foundry would have said about the frame pacing. I just remember the feeling, stepping out onto that ring, looking up and seeing the landscape curve over my head. I remember that music, that mystery, the scale of it. I had never seen anything like Halo, and I'm sure if I booted up the original game right now and froze certain frames, someone could point out all kinds of shit that looks ancient by modern standards. Because of course it does. It's 25 years old. But try telling kid me that. Because in my memory, Combat Evolved looked fucking incredible. It looked real. That ring felt enormous, mysterious, alien, impossible. And that's important because obviously, I don't have kid me eyes anymore. I'm 38. I've played hundreds of games since then. I've watched technology change. I've watched video games go from, holy shit, the water reflects, to, unfortunately, the individual hairs in this man's left nostril do not react realistically to prevailing wind conditions. 0 out of 10. Our baseline changed. My baseline changed. So when I first saw Campaign Evolved, that familiar world rebuilt with modern technology, brand new detail, new lighting, a place I knew but didn't quite know anymore. Something happened that I wasn't expecting. For just a second, I saw Halo the same way kid me remembered seeing Halo. Not literally, obviously. I know the original didn't look like that. I'm not suffering from some catastrophic graphics card related Mandela effect. But that's exactly how it looked in here, in my memory. The scale, the color, the mystery, the awe. And suddenly 38-year-old me was looking at something brand new, while kid me was recognizing something old. And the only way I know how to describe it is that those two versions of me met somewhere in the middle, and neither one was fighting over which Halo was the real Halo. Neither one needed to win. Neither one gave a shit whether the Forerunner architecture looked sufficiently weathered. We both just looked at that screen and went, dude, this is fucking amazing. And yeah, that got me. Because for all the shit we've talked about today, the rose-colored glasses, the gatekeeping, the cynicism, the internet, the anger, that's nostalgia too. And I think that's when I finally understood what had been bothering me about this entire conversation. I don't want nostalgia to disappear. I don't want to grow out of it. Fuck that. I hope I'm 75 years old and someone plays 3 notes from Halo and my ancient ass still goes, oh shit, because that's part of me. But maybe nostalgia doesn't have to mean putting the past behind glass. Maybe it doesn't have to be put everything back exactly the way it was. Maybe it can just be, look how far we've come. Because I didn't get to be a kid again that day. And honestly, I don't think I'd want to. Visit? Absolutely. Give me a weekend. We'll hit Blockbuster, grab some Surge, and play some Halo. I'll swing by Toys R Us. Maybe warn everyone about their Beanie Baby portfolios. Sell them, motherfuckers! I'll find teenage Nate. Hey, dude, couple of things. You're gonna be all right. Also, start stretching. I cannot emphasize the stretching enough. But stay there? No. Because the 25 years between that kid and me are not some unfortunate shit I need to erase. They're my life. I joined the military. I met people. I lost people. I became a husband, a dad. I found player two. I made mistakes. I changed. I grew up. I started this weird little podcast. There are people in my life right now that kid me couldn't possibly have imagined. Why the hell would I want nostalgia to require giving all of that back? I don't want the past instead of the present. I just want to be able to visit the past from the present. And maybe that's what happened with Campaign Evolved. The changes didn't prevent the nostalgia, they activated it. Because instead of showing me exactly what 12-year-old Nate literally saw, it reminded me of what 12-year-old Nate felt. That's different. And I think that's beautiful. Maybe nostalgia isn't a time machine. Maybe it's just a bridge between who you were and who you became. And if that's true, then change isn't necessarily the enemy of nostalgia. Sometimes change is just the thing that lets you cross that bridge once again. Which means the past doesn't need me standing in front of it with an energy sword. My Halo is okay. Combat Evolved is okay. Those memories aren't going anywhere. A remake doesn't overwrite them. A sequel doesn't overwrite them. Hell, a bad Halo game doesn't necessarily overwrite them. Microsoft could announce tomorrow Master Chief's Extreme Forerunner kart racing, and Combat Evolved would still be there. Although, Chief and a tiny warthog, Arbiter throwing plasma grenades out of a tiny ghost, Cortana screaming, "You're going the wrong way!" Grunt birthday party activating when someone gets hit. Dude, Microsoft, give me a call. That's free money. So, where was I? Right. No one can take the old thing away. And once that really sank in, then something else shifted because suddenly I wasn't thinking about 12-year-old me anymore. I started thinking about another 12-year-old. Some kid who doesn't have 25 years of Halo baggage. Some kid who doesn't know what the graphics looked like back in 2001. Doesn't care about Bungie versus 343 versus Halo Studios. Doesn't know about the discourse. Doesn't know they're apparently supposed to have an opinion about whether the ring looks ancient enough. They just boot up Campaign Evolved, they step out onto Installation 04, they look up, and for the very first time, they see that impossible ring climbing across the sky. And their eyes get a little wider. Maybe they call someone into the room. Maybe their dad is sitting next to them. Maybe this is the first Halo game they ever finish. And maybe 25 years from now, 3 notes from that soundtrack are going to hit them somewhere they didn't expect. And they're going to remember the room, the feel of the controller, the people, who they were. Same as me. And I realized something. We got our turn. Maybe it's theirs now. And I keep coming back to that. Because when I played Combat Evolved way back in '01, I wasn't worried about whether Halo was properly respecting the legacy of Halo. Because there wasn't a legacy just yet. I wasn't comparing Master Chief to the Master Chief from 25 years earlier. I wasn't worried about studio politics or player counts or roadmaps or engagement metrics. Whether someone had changed the art direction. I wasn't watching a 47-minute YouTube video called Bungie Just Doesn't Understand Halo, and here's all the reasons why. The thing had been out for exactly 3 days. I just played it, and it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And that's one of the greatest things about discovering something when you're a kid. You don't experience it as the latest installment in a decades-old intellectual property. It's just the coolest thing you've ever seen. Lightsaber, holy shit. The Megazord, holy shit. 4 mutant turtles doing karate while eating pizza, holy shit. The doctor opens the doors of this little blue police box, and the motherfucker is somehow bigger on the inside. Excuse me? I have several questions, and none of them are about ratings. Kids do not care about any of that. We do because we grew up. We learned how the sausage gets made. Studios, publishers, budgets, box office, development cycles, corporate strategy, canon, continuity, algorithms, streaming numbers, creative disagreements, and God help us, fandom discourse. We know too much now, but someone discovering these things today, they don't have all that baggage just yet. And I kind of envy them for that. Because somewhere there's a kid whose first Star Wars is not A New Hope. Maybe it's one of the Disney Plus shows, or a game, or a Lego set. Maybe it's one of the movies that made grown adults spend 6 straight months screaming at each other online. That kid doesn't know, and they don't care. They just saw a lightsaber and went, I need one of those immediately. And welcome aboard. Someone's very first Power Rangers are not Mighty Morphin. Someone's first Ninja Turtles aren't my turtles. Someone's doctor is not my doctor. Someone's first Marvel experience is not Tony Stark building a suit with scraps in a cave. And someone's very first Halo might be Campaign Evolved. And that doesn't take anything away from me. That right there's the realization. Because I think longtime fans sometimes act like attention is a finite resource. Like if the franchise makes something for them, there's somehow less left for us. But there isn't. The old stuff did not disappear. Your original trilogy is still there. Your Mighty Morphin episodes are still there. The 1990 Ninja Turtles movie is absolutely still there, and your Doctor is still there, and Halo 3 is still there. And if the MCU never gives you another thing that hits the same exact way Endgame did, you still got Endgame. No one came into your home overnight and patched the old thing out of existence. Although, given the state of digital media ownership, let's not give anyone any ideas. But emotionally, what you had is yours. So, what exactly are we protecting? And that's where I think the bodyguard idea finally clicked into place for me. Maybe the past doesn't need a bodyguard. Maybe it just needs a storyteller. And that's our job. Not you're doing it all wrong, but oh, dude, you like that? Wait until I show you this. Now, that right there, that's fandom. Some kid tells me they love Campaign Evolved. Awesome. You want to know what we played when I was your age? Come here, let me show you something. And now I'm firing up Combat Evolved. Not because I'm going to administer a fucking entrance exam, I'm just sharing something. This is where I came in. This is what it looked like for me. This is why that music messes me up 25 years later. That's the good stuff. Same exact thing with Power Rangers. Someone tells me their favorite Ranger came from a season 20 years after Mighty Morphin. Cool. Let me tell you about Tommy. You tell me about yours. No one has to lose. Someone loves a newer Doctor? Awesome. Tell me why. I'll tell you about the version that got me. Someone discovered Star Wars through something I don't particularly care for? That's totally fine, because maybe that thing is the reason they eventually go backwards. Maybe the new thing becomes a doorway to the old thing. And that's how you keep a fandom alive. Not by standing at the entrance checking fucking credentials. Hey kid, name 3 Jedi. I'm 7. Poser. No. Get out of the way and let the kid in. And this is where the word my starts meaning something different to me. My Halo, my Star Wars, my Power Rangers, my Doctor. There is absolutely nothing wrong with saying that. I actually love it. Because my doesn't have to mean ownership, it can mean relationship. This is the version that found me. This is the one attached to my memories. This is the one that helped make me. And that's beautiful. The problem starts when this is mine becomes therefore that cannot be yours. Because the thing they're loving right now, one day, that's going to become their nostalgia. And that's the part that messes with me. Today's new thing becomes tomorrow's, hey dude, do you remember this? Today's controversial redesign becomes someone's childhood wallpaper. Today's actor becomes their doctor. Today's Star Wars character becomes the action figure they refuse to throw away when they're 40. And maybe somewhere around 2051, some grown ass man is going to sit down at a microphone and say, you know what? Halo just hasn't been the same since campaign evolved. And my ancient ass is going to feel a disturbance in the force somewhere. The cycle continues. Back in my day, we complained about the shininess. And you know what? That's funny. But it's also kind of beautiful. Because it means the thing survived us. It kept going. It found someone else. And maybe that's the responsibility that comes with becoming the old guard. Because, Jesus Christ, that's what we are now. We're the grown-ups. And you know what? I don't know who authorized that. Because I would like to file an appeal. But here we are. And we get to decide what kind of grown-up fan we are going to be. We can be the person standing in the doorway with our arms crossed. Prove to me you're a real fan. Or we can hold the door open. Come on in. Wait until you see this shit. You know, I keep thinking about something else. One day my kids are going to do this shit. They're going to be adults. They're going to hear some song or boot up some game or see someone reboot something they loved. And suddenly they're going to be standing in a room that doesn't exist anymore. They're going to remember who was there, what our couch looked like, what life felt like. Maybe they'll remember me sitting right there beside them. Fuck, that's nostalgia being created right now. We spend so much time missing the good old days. Sometimes I wonder how often we notice we're currently living in someone else's. And that might be the thing I want to carry out of this rabbit hole. Not stop looking backward. Look backward, tell the stories, play the old games, watch those old movies, and put on the old cartoons. Show someone why you loved it. Laugh about the bullshit and remember the people who were there. Carry all of it. Just don't get so busy protecting yesterday that you miss what's happening right now today. Because 25 years goes really fast. And there's probably someone sitting beside you right now, making memories you're both going to wish you could come back to someday. So as always, a huge shout out to my player 2. Because maybe the secret was never getting the old couch back. Maybe it's just being lucky enough to find someone who keeps picking up the second controller and making brand new memories with you. And to all of you average Joes who hung out with me on this one, thank you. Seriously, there are a million different things you could have done with your time today, and you chose to spend just a little bit of it riding shotgun with me while Ian and I accidentally turned a conversation about angry Halo fans into an existential crisis about getting older, which, to tell you the truth, feels pretty on brand for this show. So whether you're listening at work, driving home, hanging out around the house, walking the dog, or wherever the hell this episode found you, thank you for being here. Thanks for going down these rabbit holes with me, and thanks for continuing to make this weird little corner of the internet feel like somewhere worth hanging out. Remember, stay gold, nerd bold, and I'll catch you on the next one. Game over.